Somewhere in the world, it's 5 o'clock. A writer sits down at his desk. He takes out a piece of paper and a pen and begins to write. It's a few letters at first, and then a few more. Soon he's got a paragraph, then a page. But all of it is written without the letter E. A big thanks to our new subscribers. If you enjoyed this video essay, give it a like. And if you like booktube-styled content, think about subscribing. We often think of writers as masters of a limitless language, discursive captains who use an umble of strange and confusing words to describe their fantastical ideas through ink and paper, frustrating normal people like you and me along the way. But not all writers are like this. Some, in fact, choose to be quite different, to limit themselves. Constrained writing is the process of tying one hand behind your back. Not literally, of course, but rather, well, literarily. Like the 10 Commandments, their rules inspire their writing. And there's a long, fascinating history that, for the most part, your first-year Intro to Lit courses have tended to ignore. While we spend plenty of time studying Shakespeare, for example, can you really say you've heard the following sentence? Now I fall. A tired suburban in liquid under the trees, drifting alongside forests simmering red in the twilight over Europe. And these are the first few words of a book by Michael Keith, with each word representing, in order, the digits of pi. Now I fall. 3 letters for now, 1 for I, and 4 for fall. 3.14. The pattern goes on for over 100 pages. Keith's constraint seems to force him at times to mine the English language for words that fit each number. To this effect, everything from the sentences he crafts to the styles of writing he relies on change drastically throughout the book. The result is something both charming and unique in its own weird way. Writers are treated to sentences like, ash piles I had not predicted degenerate into airless infinity, and movie scripts about a disease that has created hybrid monsters out of men called zompires. Constraint writing doesn't stop there. In fact, a meridian of techniques for what's essentially literary BDSM exists. And now that I'm demonetized, let's expose them. Acrostics. Acrostics is a literary technique where the
Don't dismiss this outright as the work of some raving lunatic. There's some sense to this story if you'll just hear me out. Look, we all wonder if time travel is possible, right? Well, let me tell you something. It is. I'm from the future, actually. I know you probably don't believe that, but seriously, I'm from the future. It's a really great thing, getting to see the past, watching events unfold, stuff like that. We know more now than we ever would. Behind all the fun, though, there's a more serious aspect. We aren't supposed to go in our own lifetime, and we are never allowed to contact our past selves. Let me tell you, I'm breaking that rule right now. Yes, kid, you're talking to yourself, your future self. I'm going to be executed for this, but you know what? I accept that. I'm preventing something by talking to you that is worse than death. I can't tell you outright what to do, because the filters would catch it. This is the closest I can get, trust me. I can, however, send a little message. You should probably read the first word of every paragraph. Now.
Acrostics is a literary technique where the first word or letter of every paragraph can be used to create a sentence. They were originally used in medieval literature to highlight the name of a story's writer or to invoke a saint. Some writers even used them as mnemonic devices, methods for memorizing important or secret information. Today, though, they're put to other, cheekier uses. Case in point, in William Brown's 20th century Christian poem Behold, O God, acrostics present an intricate work that unfolds itself into a prayer within a prayer, while in a 2010 email memo, Jonathan Schwartz, the CEO of Sun Microsystem, encoded the words "beat IBM" into an email of his, just to get a dig at his business's competition. Erasure. Disappearance is as much a part of human nature as existing. People live, they change, then they die, and if they're lucky, some fragment of them might live on in a manuscript or an epitaph, but eventually even those are worn away by time. But before they're gone completely, somewhere between the now and then, there is erasure. Certain writers dedicate themselves to a curious practice. They start with a block of text, then scribble out parts of it. Black marker drowns the unwanted words until just a few are left. Together, they constitute a skeletal remnant that floats to the top of a pitch-black page. The constraint technique of erasure makes new works out of old ones, with the constraint that the created piece of writing has fewer words than the text it was mined out of. In 1996, Tom Phillips, a UK artist, took an old Victorian manuscript called A Human Document and used erasure to make an entirely new book out of it. He called his new book a humament, a contraction of the words A Human Document. Palindromes. Alright, most people have seen these ones, but was it a rat I saw? Palindromes are words or sentences that can be read the same both backwards and forwards. Race car, kayak, civic, level, and prefer are all examples of palindromes. When spoken backwards, they give you, well, you get the point. In literature, the longest palindrome is actually a list of 21,012 words. Yes, that's also a palindrome, automatically compiled with a Python program that was written by Peter Norvig. But there's a difference between long and complex, and just as some palindromes can be simple chains of back and forth words, others use their constraints to deliver small but intricate literary constructions. This is the Satyr Square, a picture made up of 5 Latin words: satyr, arepo, tenet, opera, rotas. Together, they represent a short story about a farmer, presumably named Arepo, working with his crops. He sows them, sator, cares for them, opera, and churns them in the soil, rotas. Having later been used by Christians throughout Europe, the letters of the Satyr Square can also be arranged into a cross to form the phrase Pater Noster, which is Latin for Our Father. The letters of the square can also be rearranged to form 4 separate prayers or exorcisms. Retor satana, toto pre asper, orote pater sanas, pater, ores pro etate nostra, ora operare, ostentate pastor. Interestingly, this same flexible square inspired an entire world in Christopher Nolan's time travel movie Tenet. In it, Andrei Sator is tasked with farming plutonium from the ruins of a Soviet city, yet planted in the rubble is a gift from his future self. Sator's company, the same company that invents a time-distilling turning room, is called Rotas. The opening scene of the movie is an opera, where the nameless protagonist is on a job for the CIA. Meanwhile, Arepo is the name of a famous painter of the art piece that the protagonist must steal. Palindromes are all around us, and through constraint writing, they allow for a push towards some of the most thought-provoking storytelling a writer can imagine, if they just read between the lines. Lipograms. Lipography originates from the Greek word ipogrammatos and defines a written word in which an author avoids the use of a specific letter or group of letters. Lasos of Hermione was the first recorded writer to use a lipogram, omitting the letter sigma because, well, he just didn't like it. As a result, his poems Ode to the Centaur and Hymn to Demeter excluded completely. While nothing remains of the first poem, a part of the second can be found intact. I chant of Demeter and Kori, wife of the famed Hades, lifting forth a gentle-voiced hymn in the deep-toned Aeolian mode. That's really nice writing, and it's better in Greek, which points to a curious truth, that by constraining their vocabularies, writers force themselves to get creative with descriptions, and it's this forced creativity that offers new ways for readers to imagine what's being told. In other words, constraint writing adds a very different kind of texture to the texts we're used to. It's exotic because it's not allowed to be normal, and that's a very powerful style for a writer to be able to switch on and off. The Greek poets of late antiquity understood this perhaps better than anyone else. Nestor of Laranda and Tryphiodorus both wrote lipographic adaptations of the Homeric poems, Iliad and Odyssey. For those who don't know, these are very long pieces of poetry. So long, in fact, that there's a name for the genre of writing they come from: epic. Moreover, epics are already very constrained, with rules such as they must begin in media res, or in the middle of the story. They must contain long lists, or epic catalogs of names and such. They must embody the values of civilization. They must invoke the muses, begin with a clear statement of theme, feature long and formal speeches. You get the point. By compounding a lipographical constraint over the regular ones, these writers achieved something profound. So much so that in 1711, the famous London essayist Joseph Addison commented on Tryphiodorus' adaptation of the Odyssey, which for each chapter excluded a different letter of the alphabet. Addison said, "It must have been amusing to see the most elegant word of the language rejected, like a diamond with a flaw in it, as if it was tainted by the prescribed letter." He was right. Here were writers who threw away words like diamonds. But lipography isn't static, and throughout the centuries, its implementation has evolved in an almost Darwinian fashion, becoming more complex and being used to different effects. Okay, we've got a few minutes left, so here's a speed round for you. Petrus Riga, a canon of St. Mary during the 11th century, translated a version of the Bible he called Aurora, with each section being embedded with a poem that was free of A, then B, then C. That's pretty standard. Geographically, French and English lipograms tend to remove the letter E, which has the most utility of any letter in their alphabets. Again, both standard and reasonable. Meanwhile, German and Italian lipograms are more inclined to remove the letter R. For the Germans, it's particularly important because it constrains the use of masculine adjectives, allowing for smoother, more feminine-sounding writing. Let's take it up a notch. The vocalic lipograms of Spain and Portugal eject certain vowel sounds from oral stories, and this is actually one of the most challenging forms of lipogram. Don't believe me? Try asking your local barista for a triple grande mochaccino without the vowel O. And last but not least, there's a weird literary thing that happens when works like Mark Dunn's LMNOP use the lipographic constraint to comment on the very themes discussed in their work. In this book, written as a series of letters between residents of Nollop, South Carolina, Dunn imagines a great statue, erected as an homage to Nevin Nollop, the imaginary creator of the 35-letter anagram. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, in which every letter of the alphabet is used. To the citizens, this historically important sentence is taken very seriously, and a plaque with tiles for each letter of it is placed up along the statue. But as tiles begin to fall off one by one, the town's council takes this as a sign and bans the letters from actual use. In letters, in conversations, doling out more and more severe punishments for breaking the new language laws. Uncompromising in their adherence to this degrading sentence, Nollop becomes a very strange and frustrating town to live in. And ultimately, the only solution is to discredit Neville by finding a shorter anagram before the letters run out and communication becomes impossible. But the story is a really clever commentary on the themes of totalitarianism and free speech. And in his review of contemporary fiction, Irvin Mallon says, "We slowly conclude that without language, without culture, the two are inextricably bound, existence is at stake. Do you want to be a good citizen, adhering to the will of the council and its belief in a bygone sentence? Or do you want to be free?" Dunn uses lipography in order to discredit lipography, in order to discredit totalitarians. And it's a really interesting chain that takes us from literary style into literary theme. And at last, speed round over, we arrive here. At the end of our conversation, having come full circle, because here, there be monsters. After all the others, some writers simply remove the letters, without removing the words, arguably defeating the purpose of a lipogram and resulting in a mountain of gibberish. It's like a weird postmodern constraint writing thing. I mean, seriously, what the f*** is this? Nemink to good to rib rukug gur pult nefils grus blot clips tut from digens to rink up to this. Look, that's a paragraph from William R. Espy's book, 181 Missing O's. At the end of it all, constraint writing is a tapestry of creative literature, with opportunities to showcase writing styles that are just so unique and so different from what we're used to. Writers get to challenge themselves by limiting themselves, and by limiting themselves, they create some really fantastic pieces of work. And while there were many more writing styles that didn't make it into this video, it's a field that I think is well worth getting caught up in.
There's no need to constrain yourself, darling. Hit that subscribe button as hard as you can. You can even share me with your friends.